This video contains swearing. It is not suitable for children and it is not suitable for anybody who is offended by swearing. Alright, David Harry here. So what I'm going to do is a follow-up to the previous two videos that I'd done to do with this firmware issue with the Acasis TB501 Pro. Now the reason why I'm doing this video is because a number of people have been asking other questions after those first two videos, and quite rightfully so. Now, the thing is, I would not have known about some of these questions that were going to get asked, so it's not something that I could have dealt with in those first two videos. However, people have got, like, you know, some serious concerns as to what's going on here. So what I'm going to do is try my best, you know, to kind of answer some of the things that are being asked here. But just before I do, just remember, I've got nothing to do with Acasis technical support, okay? Right, so I think the biggest question realistically, I think, was people are being worried about when they order one of these TB501 Pros, is there a chance that they're going to get one that's defective? Well, let me give you the answer to that. So as of the 9th, which was, I think, what, 2 days ago from when I'm doing this video. So as of the 9th, this is what Acasis had to say about that. What's happening now? Corporate has recalled all remaining TB501 Pro inventory for comprehensive testing. Every single unit is being opened, firmware checked and updated if necessary. No more units go out until we've personally verified each one, as we can't risk any more problematic units reaching customers. Okay, so what Acasis are clearly saying there then is that every single one that they've still got in stock as of the 9th they're all going to be opened, they're all going to be checked, and not one of them will leave Acasis if it's got the wrong firmware on it. Now, that's the only thing that I've been told there. I've not been told how long that's going to take, so I can't answer that question if anybody wants to know the answer to that question. But I'm going to assume that that's going to take a short while to sort out. But regardless, what Acasis are definitely saying there is that from the 9th, nothing is going to leave them, which is the wrong firmware. So for anybody who orders anything from the 9th onwards, so like 2 days ago, from what Acasis is saying is you will definitely receive the correct version. So I wouldn't be worrying too much about whether or not you're going to have a problematic unit delivered to you after the 9th. Now, another question that's been coming up is which of the firmwares are the ones like which are problematic. Well, during the first video, I did mention 56.56 was a problematic firmware. However, there has been a couple of other firmwares since that one, and I don't know what they are, and I don't know which ones would be problematic or not. So as to which ones are problematic, I don't know, but then that also ties into another question that I'd been given as well. So which firmware is the correct one? Well, unfortunately, I can't answer that question either, because the first unit that I got was basically a pre-production unit, although I didn't realize that at the time. Now, the firmware on that one was older than what it should be now. So there's no point in me telling you what that firmware was, because that one doesn't exist anymore either. So like I say, I do not know what the firmware is right now, which is the fully working one. And the fully working one that I did have was an older one in a pre-production unit. So yes, whilst it did work, there's no point in me telling anyone about that firmware because it no longer exists. So two things there. One, I don't know what all the firmwares are, and two, I do not know what is the most up-to-date firmware. Now, for any answers to questions like that, I'm going to have to refer you to Acasis's tech support, because they're going to be the only people who could answer that question. Now, another thing that's been mentioned within some of the comments is people's great displeasure at having to return these units, go through all the messing around to do that, And if you're not in the US or the United States, you're going to have to pay for this yourself to send it back and then get a reimbursement. But then on top of that, you've then got to wait for this thing to come back to you as a fixed unit. And that's going to take however long it takes in postage time or shipping time to go from you back to China, and then from China back to you wherever you are in the world. The only thing I can say about that is I absolutely 100% agree with anybody who's got a problem with that, because as far as I'm concerned, it's just out of order. Do you know what I mean? But again, I've just got to reiterate the point. I've got nothing to do with the cases, so there's nothing that I personally can do, I've got a lot to say about it, obviously, but there's nothing really that I can do about that. And I understand people want to, voice their displeasure at such things. Use the comments section to my videos, to do that. I don't mind that, do you know what I mean? Because I can understand there'll be a lot of people out there who are going to be upset about this. However, if you want to kind of maybe have your voice heard in the right direction, maybe get in touch with the cases directly and mention these things to them. I can tell you now at this point, because I'm privy to a lot more detail from a cases than what I can give to use, in these in these videos, because my emails are a lot more descriptive of the stuff that I'm telling you. But these are descriptive, not to do with things that would help the customers and stuff. But I can see from my emails the position that the cases have put themselves in, and I can see from these emails just how sorry they are about it. However, that's not going to get around the fact that there's a whole bunch of customers who are being massively put out here. So if you do want to voice your displeasure, I would suggest you get in touch with the cases directly to voice that. Because one of the other things here, and this is something that ties in with it, and this is something that has come up a few times, why can't we just download a firmware updater with the firmware in it, and then we'll do a manual firmware update ourselves and stuff? That is something that I'd already asked the cases myself in the past, before this point as well. But for whatever reason, the cases just don't do that. Maybe after this whole thing happening, maybe that's something that they may want to look into further down the line. Then at least that way, if anything similar to this happens, or even if a firmware needs upgrading or updating for some other reason, they could easily do it then. And all they've got to do is get in touch with the database of users that they've got through the people who ordered directly from their website, and inform them through an email of such things, and give them links to, say, a firmware updater and stuff like that. But yeah, just to kind of get that bit all rounded off. I'm not disagreeing with anyone here, do you know what I mean? Because I think that, for someone to have to go through all the messing around of repackaging something up, spending their own money to resend it back, and and then have to wait and all the rest of it, that is a massive pain in the ass. Do you know what I mean? There's no looking at that lightly. And then the other thing that I don't understand with this is that Acasis are using prepaid packaging for people in the United States. Well, that's great for you guys in the United States, but why aren't Acasis doing that for other people around the rest of the world? Do you know what I mean? So people who live where I live in the UK, you're going to have to pay money just the same way as everybody else does who is not in the United States to have your thing sent back. And whatever the mechanism is to get that money back as a refund, I don't know how that works, and Acasis still haven't been that clear about it. Okay, so hopefully that's cleared that bit up there. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble now, and my whole intention with this particular video was to try and be as succinct as I can. Unfortunately, as I'm talking about these things and having to think through it and stuff as I'm talking, it's just pissing me off even more, do you know what I mean? So I'm sorry if I can't stay on track and be succinct about such things, because you have to remember, I'm first and foremost, I'm here for the viewers, not for the manufacturers. And I can see, amongst those comments, the frustrations that's going on and stuff, and, how pissed off the viewers are. But believe me, I'm just as pissed off. And when I'm talking about these things, I get pissed off even more, do you know what I mean? Anyway, one last thing just to mention here. Now, this was mentioned in the previous two videos, but I want to try and be as clear as I can with this. And I'll explain in a second why this is also very confusing. And once again, it's got nothing to do with you, the end users. Right, so a number of people are very confused as to, you know, this firmware revision and, you know, should they be sending their unit back or should they be getting in touch with Acasis? Well, as I'd already mentioned in the previous 2 videos that I've done, I'll reiterate the point again, but like I say, it does sound confusing and counterintuitive. The version of the enclosure that we're talking about, in fact, you know what? Let me just use these 2 as props. So this enclosure here is the TB501 Pro Gen 5. This one here is the TB501 Pro Gen 4. Neither one says Gen 5 and Gen 4 on them, yet they both say the exact same model number and they both look identical. There are no distinguishing marks to say that either of these 2 units are different than one another. However, the Gen 5 version, this officially was released on the 20th of August 2025, and this was only available and is only available on the Acasis website. Okay, so if you were to have bought a TB501 Pro from the Acasis website on or after the 20th of August 2025, you would have received a Gen 5 version. Now, let's just not go back down the rabbit hole of the firmwares being screwed up on a number of them, but it would have been a Gen 5 version. However, if you have to bought, you know, a TB501 at the same time, say on Amazon, or if you bought one today or yesterday on Amazon, this will always have been a Gen 4 version. And also, if you'd have bought anything on the Acasis website before the 20th of August, they too would have been the Gen 4 version. Now, I understand where people are getting confused here, because the problematic firmware on the Gen 5 one is 56.56, but 56.56 works perfectly well on the Gen 4 version. So I can totally understand why that's confusing people, because it confused me as well, because I'm looking at them and, you know, I'm looking at 5 or 6 of them on a table and I can't tell the difference, do you know what I mean? So I got really confused, especially when I was testing them, because what it was, well, I don't know if you're going to be able to see this. That might not be dead clear. Okay. There's a sticker on there that says Gen 5-1, and then I've got 2 others that I've got Gen 5-2, Gen 5-3. Now, the sticker I've had to put on the outside. There's also a sticker on the side there. Sorry, I know this is getting boring, but this will just explain to you how confusing it was for me. Now, on the inside, it might not be in focus, but you can see that there's a sticker there. Anyway, so there's stickers on the inside, on the outside for quick reference, and also the lid, because the lid has got a serial number on it, so the lid had to get matched to the unit. So I've got 3 of them so far that I've got Gen 5-1, Gen 5-2, Gen 5-3. Now, I'd done that ahead of me testing anything, right? But as it happens, 2 of the units are wrong. They are Gen 5, but they've got the wrong firmware on them. So the point I'm getting at is here, even though I tried my best to keep an eye on all the individual units and stuff so I could track them through my own testing, because I have like a bit of a database when I'm testing stuff and doing my speed testing ahead of doing videos and stuff, I was getting confused with it, you know, because the thing is, because the motherboards are the same, you know, technically the same as what they are on the previous TB501 Pro. In fact, you're not going to be able to see this. Hold on. I'm really sorry to be going off on a tangent here, but I just really want people to understand that this is really confusing. You're probably not going to be able to see it, right? But on the motherboard there's some gold writing. Right. Now that says here, TX002M1_V1.3. Now that's actually the revision of the motherboard. But here's something that's really confusing. the revision of that motherboard is the exact same revision for the motherboard that's on the Gen 4 version. So the Gen 4 version and the Gen 5 version have both got the same revision numbers on the motherboards themselves. Now, the only way that you can truly know whether there was any difference between these boards is to completely undo the units, which I've had to do to 5 of them, and then get like, well, I had to use a camera to zoom in and film the chipsets because with my naked eye I couldn't read the part numbers on the main on the main chipset. That is the only way I could find out which ones were really which ones, was by identifying the chipsets, because obviously there's a difference in the chipset names and stuff like that. And I don't want to go into all that in great detail because, again, I don't want to be confusing people any further than what they already are. But what I'm just trying to explain here, let me just put this in a nutshell as best as I can now. See, this is the problem. In order to explain certain things, it takes more than 5 minutes. Do you know what I mean? And these things are not as fucking easy as what, like, you know, manufacturers might lead you to believe. Like, oh yeah, well, it's just a firmware. It's like, well, you say it's just a firmware, but why the fuck have the enclosures got the same names on? Why are they using the same fucking motherboard revision numbers on one that's Gen 4 and one that's do you know what I mean? It gets sorry for the swearing, but it just gets fucking ridiculous. Listen, I'm really sorry about that swearing then, and I appreciate that is offensive to some people out there. However, I will have left it in the video, and the reason why is because I'm trying to be truthful to myself here. And I do swear in my regular language anyway. I don't do it on YouTube, on this channel at least, only because I try to keep it as clean as possible. But I'm sorry, I want people to actually understand how pissed off I am with this whole thing, and I don't want to water down, like, you know, my intentions here. Do you know what I mean? So I'm going to leave that swearing in. Anyway, the last thing that I will say here, and this is something that a few people have picked up on as well, and it is also something that I mentioned before the release of the unit, and that is, why does it have the same name? Now, the thing is, I don't know the answer to that question, because as far as I'm concerned, it was absolutely the worst and dumbest move in the world to bring out a product which has got a different feature set but call it by the same name as the previous one. Calling both of these units TB501 Pro, that was a stupid mistake in the first place. However, where it's gotten really bad by not having different names is this situation that we are in right now. Because when someone like me keeps having to say things like, yeah, but don't forget the Gen 4 version of the TB501 Pro is not a problem with firmware version 56.56. However, if you get to the Gen 5 variation of the TB501 Pro with 56.56, and that's where you get your problem. I mean, come on, what kind of nonsense does that sound like? Do you know what I mean? If we'd have had two different names, which is what we should have had, because they are two completely different products at this point, because one does something that the other one doesn't do, then if I were to just say to people, yeah, let's pretend that this broke one now was called the TB502, right? All I would have been doing was saying to people, yes, the TB502 has a problem from this date onwards, and this is what Acasis are fixing. I wouldn't have to keep on saying, oh yeah, but see the other one with the same name, but it's the Gen 4 version. Don't worry about this one, and don't worry about the fact that this has got the same firmware as the fucked version of this one. Do you know what I mean? So yes, I absolutely 100% agree with anybody out there who's sitting there going, why didn't it just have a different name? Because that different name would have helped it on so many levels, not least of all in its own right as a completely different product. But right now with this massive fuck up, it would have definitely have helped, because, you know, we could easily have just like said, see this one? It's got nothing to do with it, because this one isn't called a TB502. So that's not the one we're talking about. This is the one we're talking about. Anyway, I think that'll do it for this video, and hopefully I've managed to answer some of those other questions that had come up in the comment sections of the previous two videos. And hopefully I've been a little bit clearer maybe on some of the things that are going on as well. Now, if there's any other concerns, then yep, most certainly ask away in the comment section and stuff. However, beyond this point, there really isn't that much more that I would know than what I've disseminated across this and the previous 2 videos. Hopefully at some point Acasis themselves may become proactive within the comment section of these videos, this one and the previous 2, and I'd love it if Acasis did do that, because then people could be getting information directly from the horse's mouth within that instance. Also as well, if anybody out there wouldn't mind, if you could like make any posts on your experience with your return procedures and stuff. That's not necessarily for me, but I would strongly recommend to do this just so that other users have got an idea of how to go about this procedure and what to expect when going through it as well. And I appreciate, like I've already said, I appreciate that it's a full-on pain in the arse, but it is going to have to be done in order to get your units replaced and stuff. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to dive off, and like I say, hopefully this video has been useful to some people out there. I'm David Harry. Thank you very much for watching this video. Take care and goodbye now.